Hey folks, it's your host Marlon Gardner. You're listening to the Divided States of America show. Thank you for tuning in. Today, there was lots of news on Friday. We took a fun Friday off. We'll talk about it today. First up, Biden's on the attack. Then Trump talks about pardoning those defendants of the January 6 riots. The divide is clear. That and more on today's show. You're listening to the Divided States of America show.
Welcome to the Divided States of America show, where your host, Marlon Gardner, takes on the most divisive issues in our divided nation. We'll sort through the best and worst of politics and culture, asking questions and looking for answers that our two-ring, two-party circus has failed to provide. And here is your host, Marlon Gardner.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had a great Labor Day weekend. I can tell you in Southern California, it was hot. I probably shouldn't say that because most of you think of Southern California as a wonderful, wonderful place to be in the summer, and it is, but it was hot. I can't imagine living in some of the places you all do and the temperatures you all endure, and I often joke and ask why.
And here is your
Even
host.
the birds go south for the winter. Don't know why you don't too. Anyway, we're back. I did take another Friday off. The weather was too nice. Again, it's hard to talk about the most divisive issues in our divisive nation on Fridays. Sometimes I can do it, sometimes I can't. Sometimes I just want to find and create joy stories, and you always know that Labor Day weekend is going to be a good one. It's what we call the official end of summer. We know summer doesn't end for a couple more weeks or another, at least 2 more weeks. But it kind of ends the fun. Kids go back to school, work gets serious again, the vacationing is over, and we have to pay attention. Now, I don't know that we all have to pay attention to politics, but we do know that it intersects with our lives at some point. And for those of you who do pay attention, if you remember the point of this show, we do take on the most divisive issues in our divided nation. We do it in hopes of having respectful, thoughtful conversations about the things that bother us, concern us, worry us, about the things we worry about for our children, our future. Sometimes it's just good fun. Sometimes it's real issues that impact us on a day-to-day basis. I always acknowledge the fact that most people are just hardworking Americans. They want to take care of their families. They want to be healthy. They would love to go on vacation. Some would love to come to Southern California. But there are challenges that we face, and all too often we look to our politicians to solve our problems, and we forget that we are the solution to most of our problems. The change we look for has to come from us. If we just relied on our political leaders, we'd be in trouble. Because we can question their motivation. We can question the incentive for them to do right by us. And by us, I mean all Americans. Even though we disagree, we are still Americans. That common bond, though, you don't see in our politics. That common bond, we don't see at times where we really need it. COVID was probably one of the better examples where we failed as a nation to take on something that killed 1 million people. We get together, we bond, we unite, we coalesce. Oftentimes when we go to war, we understand that there are common enemies, and in many cases we fight them together. We didn't with COVID. We aren't with the many of the issues that we're faced with today, and the divide is crystal clear. Before I get into, I don't know that it gets any bigger on the divide line than Biden being on the attack and Trump talking pardons for the January 6th defendants. That is as clear a polarized perspectives as it could possibly get. One is talking about, or at least sharing his concern for democracy. The other is talking about pardoning people. The first person thinks is the ones threatening it. But we'll get into that. But before we do, a friend posted something today. We've been seeing it here in California for a few days. And it's just a reality, particularly when the heat is as high as it is and people are running their air conditioners. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people, at least where I live, who either don't have them or use it so rarely. It's not as big a deal as it is in some parts of the country. There are a lot of us who use it upstairs but would never think of using it downstairs because, it just doesn't get that hot. But again, this weekend it was pretty hot. However, all throughout California over the last week, it has been abnormally warm, and California declared a grid emergency as power use nears a 5-year high. Obviously, high temperatures do that. What is ironic, and a friend of mine posted, was that California has only gotten hotter, and over the last 5 to 10 years, and it won't change in the near future. So he makes the quip about, let's ban fossil fuels and mandate the purchase of electric vehicles, even though in this grid emergency they're saying between the hours of 4 p.m. and 9 p.m., when people are getting home and turning those ACs on, don't charge your electric vehicles. It's the rage. Lots of local stations have been covering it. Lots of people are talking about it. But I find this particular topic ironic. If, in fact, climate change is what the consensus of scientists say it is, and the research continues, and we see that fossil fuels are a significant, major contributor to the warming, I don't know how you say, let's continue with fossil fuels, even though they make things warmer, and then complain about the fact that our electricity grid can't handle it, and they want you to not charge electric vehicles from 4 to 9, as if, number one, that's the only time that you can charge electric vehicles, or two, electric vehicles are worse for the whole scenario than fossil fuels. I've said it a number of times. I'm no left-wing zealot. I believe there is a transition needed for climate change. A transition. Not we flip the switch, tomorrow everything's cut off. You have to recycle, use paper straws, stop flying, no more beef, and all of the, drastic things people could be doing if they thought they needed to stop climate change right now. Although it wouldn't, because most of the world still wouldn't be doing some of the things we're doing, and they wouldn't be making the changes that are necessary. And since climate change doesn't know borders, if we're doing something here, and let's just use Mexico for proximity's sake, they're not, we're still going to see the same effects. We all know that. We get that. But the idea that people would be complaining about not charging electric vehicles between 4 and 9 and comparing that to the continued use of fossil fuels, which is in part, according to scientists, the reason it's getting warmer, seems silly to me. California is talking about a complete ban of the sale of fossil fuel-based vehicles, gas-powered vehicles by 2035. Do I think it will happen? I don't know. It seems ambitious. California likes to lead the way in these things, these major movements, these major changes. I don't know if it will actually happen. I don't know where we'll be with the transition. I don't know where we'll be with wind power and solar power. I don't know if nuclear plants are going to come back online. I don't know what technology will be in place 13 years from now to determine whether or not that's a reasonable goal, or if we'll have to reset goals based on where we are and the issues we're faced with. We know we've had to open things up a little bit more just because of Ukraine and Russia. We know we're doing things to keep our economy and our way of doing things currently alive when we know we're up against a shortage in fuel. But what I didn't understand from the friend's post is the idea that 4 to 9 and not having access to charging your electric vehicles, and it's not a ban, it's recommended. If you don't follow the recommendations, then they run out of power. We have rolling blackouts, in which case you won't be charging anything, let alone your electric vehicle. But if the suggestion is not to do it from 4 to 9, is that worse than continuing to use fossil fuels with no regard, and it getting warmer, and it being more like this more often, and farmers having droughts, and there being flooding and all of the other things that they're saying are a result of climate change? Is 4 to 9 the trade-off that we should be screaming about? Now, I will say the irony, of course. They want us to transition to electricity, and there isn't enough. And I don't have a problem taking issue with my local power company. Based on the rates, which I heard recently were in the top 3 highest rates in the country, if we're paying significantly more for electricity, the least you could do is provide it. If we're paying significantly more for electricity, the last thing I would expect is a rolling blackout because of your inability to, in no other way to say it, do your job. If we have to pay more for something, if a product becomes more expensive or a service becomes more expensive, I expect the service to be better. I expect the product to be more efficient and also be better. It's amazing to me. I get the irony. It wasn't lost on me that we want to go to electricity, but we don't have enough. Now, again, that's a technology issue, but one from a consumer base that we really should be addressing if we're really paying more and we're not getting the most basics of the things that we need from the people that are asking us for more money. It just doesn't even make sense. But there are a lot of people putting it on social media that we shouldn't ban fossil fuels because we can't charge our cars from 4 to 9. I don't know that that's where the energy should be. I don't know where that's the focus of it. But I do know if I'm paying more for electricity, I really, really would like to get it and not think that the idea of actually charging an electric car would at any point be difficult to do as we make the transition. I don't know what you think, but we're always here to find out. You can always go to our website, thedsashow.com, thedsashow.com. You can go there. There's a very clear button. Click on it. It says to join the show, to join us on air. If you've got comments, if you have an opinion on California's electric power grid and the audacity of saying don't charge your electric vehicles when we know that's what we're trying to transition to, you can always go to thedsashow.com and let us know what you think. You can also comment. If you comment on YouTube or Facebook, I can actually see your comments while I'm doing the show. Put them up, and we can have that discussion live. I appreciate those of you who do listen to the show live. You know we're here weekdays at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and Twitter. You can also catch replays of the 40, I believe this is episode number 40, of the Divided States of America show. I always appreciate your feedback. Now, on Friday, there was a lot of news. And as we try to outline what the divide is, and as we try to look for ways to overcome the divide, you know I'm a firm believer in the idea that a third party could come in and moderate the views, particularly of the extreme left and the extreme right, neither of which I have a great appreciation for, because I don't think they reflect the true heart or true heartbeat of America. I don't think the average hardworking citizen is as polarized. Now, when you're only given two choices and you feel like you have to pick a team that more identifies with you than maybe the other team does, I think it's easy to fall into the trap, fall into one side or the other. So you can already imagine, and I've described it, my excitement for the idea of the Forward Party, where their slogan is not left, not right, but forward. That just pleases me. I'd like for the impact and the importance of the left and right to be minimized. I'd like them both to have to go through another filter other than themselves, because they've both settled in on the idea that they're just going to argue with each other. They're just going to throw the rhetoric back and forth. They're just going to hate. And we've reached the point where now it's violent and the rhetoric is just endless. And they seem perfectly okay with that. We've reached a part in our history, or a time in our history, where they're okay with the other side failing, even though it hurts America, so that they can point out that they did fail and convince people to come to them. It isn't the common goal of Americans succeeding. It isn't we the people. It's we, our party. It's we, our personal politics. Your failure is our advantage. Go ahead and fail. Don't care what the price is for Americans. We're going to tout your failure. We're not going to negotiate. We're not going to compromise. We're not going to lead. We are literally going to say, we hope you fail. When you do, come to us. It's absurd. It isn't how we would solve any problem anywhere in our lives. It's not how we would solve it with our children. It's not how we would solve it in our workplace. If you're a business owner, it's not how you'd solve it with your customers. You wouldn't say, buy the other company's product, I hope it fails, then you come to me. You'd actually be just making or looking to make a better product. You wouldn't tell your kids, I'm going to let you fail in school before you listen to my method of how you should move forward. You would come up with a different plan while they're failing. You wouldn't wait for failure. There are so many instances where we all would do something different in a position of power, in a position of leadership, to change the outcome. Well, let me remind you, you are in a position of power, and you can change the outcome. Thoughtful, respectful conversations here, which I would love to see translated to millions of people talking about compromise and ways to make it better, not make it my way at the expense of your way, the all or nothing where we end up getting nothing. That's where we are. That's where we are. Now, what made Friday exciting from a news perspective is Joe Biden was on the attack. I thought it was cute. Cute in that, most people think he's senile. Most people think he's inadequate. Most people think there are people behind him pulling the puppet strings. Not most people. A lot of people think there are people behind him pulling the puppet strings. He's just the figurehead making the decisions. I've had some real good discussions with some really good friends. One is a mentor and a very close friend, somebody I spend a lot of time with. We have such a huge common interest in where we put our time and effort and what's important to us, and how we give back. And he and I were having this discussion. And you know, I've shared my litmus test on a lot of the political issues we face. It really goes like this, and we all know this is an ode to my children, and one day I won't be here, but these messages about what I thought was right or wrong, or when and where I thought they need to step up and lead. And it's not specific instruction. It's not an identical or a very specific roadmap. It's an ideology that you have an obligation to do better. You have an obligation to do better for yourself, your family, your community, your country. If that's what moves you, if that's what motivates you, do something. Don't sit back. Don't do nothing. So as I look at that, and we talk about Joe Biden being on the attack, again, it was interesting because if you think he's not all there, he seemed pretty clear in his attack. And I'll call it an attack, and I'm going to go further. It was divisive. While he did try to qualify what he said, it was divisive. It is his truth. It is what he believes. But it was divisive. Now, if you support Biden and you think his target is everything he said it was, you're going to feel better. My bet is his approval rating will go up. The more he's on the attack, the more he points out his opposition. It's as if we've been conditioned to hate. It's as if we've been conditioned to be more right by making people more wrong, that his attack on MAGA, Make America Great Again, which, you know, I've had my other names for that. If he's right, it makes you more wrong. So I think he's actually going to get political points for having done it, which was also in question because it wasn't a campaign speech. It was supposed to be a unity speech, which clearly he wasn't trying to unify anybody who identifies as a MAGA supporter. Again, he tried to qualify it. You'll hear it. We'll talk about it. We'll show you some of the responses out there. But it was as divisive as one of Trump's speeches or rants, where he clearly points out or tweets about or retweets things that make the divide so crystal clear that it's no wonder we are as a nation where we are. If our leadership puts out that message and its followers feel emboldened from the message, where do you think we're going to end up? Now, I keep saying it's cute because I didn't expect Biden to be on the attack. I always thought one of the distinguishing characteristics of Biden is that he tried to be a statesman. He tried to be what he wanted to be or claimed to be as a senator. In talking to my good friend this weekend, we talked about the fact that he was okay with the segregated schools and the busing and his attitude and approach 30, 40 years ago. I explained to my friend if his views have changed, I'm okay with it. If Trump one day woke up and was more moderated and he seemed more thoughtful, I would hold out for hope. I remember saying when he gave his acceptance speech after winning the presidency, it was the softest, kindest, most moderate thing I ever heard him say. And you can imagine listening to the debates and the campaigns and all of the things that he did that made me think, if my children acted like this, they would be in trouble. We would have a problem. And remember, again, that's my litmus test. It's not my politics. It's my family. It's my future grandchildren. It's the kids that I pour into. It's regular people and what we consider right and wrong in our daily lives, not the status of the elites, not the characteristics or the boundaries that they hold themselves to. It's the ones that the rest of us have to work with. Those are the deciding factor for me in what's right or wrong. Obviously, I have faith, so right or wrong for me comes from a higher power, but just the daily dealings of average people and what we have to do. So when you see the elites working on an entirely different platform, it's just not how I operate within my ecosystem. But Biden on the attack still seemed cute to me because the old guy doesn't typically go that way. He did. He will get additional support. I too thought it was divisive. Little things like not calling out the specific people and using ideas and concepts might have carried out the same message without it hitting a bullseye. And the fact that it hits a bullseye, again, it just creates a bigger divide. And if it's for the sake of winning, it's unfortunate. If it's for the sake of trying to unite us, it's unfortunate because that certainly won't do it. But enough about what he said. Let's show you. Let's let you see and hear for yourselves what Joe Biden said last week.
Hello, everyone. I'm Addison Smith. Welcome to In Focus. Last night, Emperor Palpatine, or Joe Biden, take your pick, gave his so-called unity speech on the...
Now, I have to stop. This is the OAN network, One America Network. I believe they're based here in Southern California. I know they've been taken off a lot of cable stations. They're in it to make money. I applaud their effort to build an audience, advertise to that audience, sustain their operation. But for the people who look to them for news and information and think that it's all factual, heads up. You just heard they called him Emperor Palpatine. I believe that's a Star Wars reference. They have very strong opinions. And as long as they try to present it as opinions, you're aware. It's unfortunate that many people will take their opinions as fact. That's just the society we live in. Again, respectful, thoughtful conversations are the goal of this program, and also pursuit of the truth. Pursuit of the truth. But let's continue. They did a pretty good job of cutting up the speech and letting the attack portion of it, be crystal clear. And that's what I'm trying to share with you. What I thought from Biden that was actually divisive. Let's go on.
Battle for the soul of this nation. Because we're so divided, we're so torn apart. The president is claiming he wants to unite us all, bring us all together for one happy kumbaya. Because when I think of Joe Biden, I think of unity itself, unity embodied. A man who just wants to bring the country together, restore what's been broken. And so this is what Biden ran with, that this was a unity speech, where he proceeded to talk about nearly half the country as if they were Al-Qaeda in September of 2001. Watch.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. Now I want to be very clear up front. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know, because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country. These are hard things. MAGA forces are determined to take this country backwards to an America where there is no right to choose, no right to privacy. No right to contraception, no right to marry who you love. They promote authoritarian leaders and they fan the flames of political violence that are a threat to our personal rights, to the pursuit of justice, to the rule of law, to the very soul of this country. And now America must choose to move forward or to move backwards. To build a future obsessed about the past. To be a nation of hope, unity, and optimism. Or a nation of fear, division, and of darkness. MAGA Republicans have made their choice. They embrace anger. They thrive on chaos. They live not in the light of truth, but in the shadow of lies. But together we can choose a different path. We can choose a better path. Forward to the future. A future of possibility, a future to build and dream and hope. And we're on that path moving ahead. But as I stand here tonight, equality and democracy are under assault. We do ourselves no favor to pretend otherwise. So tonight, I've come to this place where it all began, to speak as plainly as I can to the nation about the threats we face.
Where do we even begin? Let's start with, because when I think of Joe Biden,
I can tell you where I'll start.
Unity apart. The president is claiming he wants to unite us all, bring us all.
That wasn't a uniting speech. He literally could have took the word MAGA out and talked about forces and people who, in his belief, are doing this, and this, and it probably would have hit home better. People would have then had to self-identify if they thought they were that, and you could have easily said, if that doesn't describe you, then it wasn't you I was talking about. It was divisive in picking that target. And don't get me wrong, you can be direct. You can talk to whomever you want to. You can have whatever opinion you want to. There are no limitations to people saying whatever it is they want to say. But when you're in a position of power and you call out specific people, you need to know that those people are likely never going to consider themselves on the same path as you. And if the goal was to unite, that is the path you wanted people to be on. And when you call them out in that fashion, they're not likely to do it. Now, I'll play devil's advocate for Joe Biden. He believes everything he said, and there are some truths about some aspects of the things he said. If you speak in absolute terms, you know what's going to happen. If you skirt that line, you know what's going to happen. It didn't matter that he qualified it by saying not all Republicans are part of MAGA. But I think he's referencing the MAGA who thinks that the election was stolen, the MAGA who is okay with the violence that we've seen in our country surrounding Donald Trump and his opposition to a lot of the norms, like the transition of power, like attacking the Capitol. And I think Biden believes it. And I think there are a lot of Americans who believe it. But being able to have a discussion about that divide, being able to unite it, won't start with that. It won't. Now, Biden's probably also thinking some of the things that I think. You don't need to ask permission from people that you think are wrong. You don't need their validation. You don't even need their support. And you don't. But if it's a speech about uniting, you might have to have some uniting characteristics. That wasn't it. That didn't accomplish that goal. I would much rather have heard about the things that we could do to settle some of the issues that divide us. And if there's, in all of our politicians or all of our leaders' eyes, nothing that can be done to settle, we are in trouble. Because about the only thing you expect from leadership is them to lead you in a positive direction. I feel like our current leadership is leading us in two different directions, and they think it's perfectly okay. It's not. That's not what I look to leadership for. But I, too, found that speech to be divisive. He literally could have kept the word MAGA out of it and described characteristics that are factual for some people. But let, again, those people identify themselves. And for the people who oppose those forces, let them self-identify who he thought they would be. But in any case, solutions to the divide would be required if you were trying to actually unify people. That wasn't it. But a lot of people had a lot of opinions about it. Let's take a look at some of those. It was interesting to see. Lauren Berbert, she has her own views on the world. But she said something funny. At least it was funny to me. Never before has a president shown such hatred for his fellow Americans. I was trying to be sure she was being serious. Never before has a president shown so much hatred for his fellow Americans. Here's another view coming out of that. Nancy Pelosi. Tonight, Biden, in his inspiring and optimistic remarks, made crystal clear that our rights, our freedom, and our democracy are on the line. Well, I suppose if he believes the things he was saying about the threat to democracy, specifically from MAGA, were true, okay, that's what he believes. But Nancy Pelosi certainly isn't trying to unify anybody with this, but you could at least see she's trying to be more vague and let people self-identify. Don't get me wrong, the people who hate her are going to hate her. The people who love her are going to love her. But the difference between this and what Biden said was she didn't take specific aim at MAGA. This isn't support of Nancy Pelosi, but it's just an example of you describing the things that you want to see or you like or you think are important without specifically targeting someone who, even in their own version, may have a moderate view and thereby eliminating them from ever being anywhere closer in that divide. Kayleigh McEnany, Trump's former press secretary. Mr. Unity just gave the most divisive presidential speech I've ever heard. Kayleigh, come on. I'm pretty sure you heard some pretty divisive things from the guy you worked for. So in part, as I listen to people complain about what I do believe was a divisive speech, is that many of the people are complaining have supported a man who liked to give very divisive speeches, very divisive tweets. It's as if their standards or their filter of right or wrong only applies to people they don't like. And I've said this before on the show. And the people they do like, there are no standards. There are no filters. There is no concern from the people that they actually like. None at all. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. I don't understand the irony behind someone like Kayleigh McEnany, but I do understand Joe Biden's speech was divisive. More. Matt Gaetz. Did Joe Biden just declare war on red state America? I don't recall that. If he were declaring war, I do think he was declaring it on MAGA. Do you think every red state is a MAGA supporter? The answer truly could be yes. Joe Biden thinks it's his sworn enemy if we think he's declaring war. I think he outlined some things that he thought were a problem for American democracy. He did it in a divisive way. When, though, are we going to deal with the divisive issue of people who not only think it was a lie, but are willing to be violent about it? Are the people who claim this speech to be the most divisive, do they have any concern about the issue he was speaking of? Again, I believe the speech was divisive, but the issues still need to be addressed. Matt, I think you do hope he was declaring war on red states. I do think in our polarized nation, you do want it to be us versus them. You do want people to have that polarized choice. And I don't expect that if I look back on your tweets, I'm going to find anything unifying coming from you either. More. And this is the qualification that we know existed, but that we know no one is going to remember. Another tweeter, Matt Archbold. Here's what President Trump said. He said, I want to be very clear. Not every Republican, not even a majority of Republicans, are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces the extreme ideology. I suppose there's truth to that too. But again, it goes back to his isolation of that particular group. He's labeled them, identified them. He wants his supporters to feel the same animus against them. But he did it in a speech where he was claiming he would be uniting people. I don't know that that would be how you unite them. I suppose it would be one way to unite them in your party. I suppose it would be one way to unite them in support of what you believe. But I don't know that that would be particularly how I would try to unite America. Just not how I'd do it. Got a comment? It was an infomercial the media called an address to the American people. I believe the president's administration said it was an address to the American people and not a campaign speech. And I agree, it probably hit that line so very hard. I would imagine that he thinks defending democracy because he believes that is the enemy, and again, the transition of power and the violence and the hatred, I'm sure he believes are in the best interest of America, but he did tote a fine line between a campaign speech and a rally and an address to the nation. That was very blurry to the point where it was probably so blurry that it wasn't what he said it was, really. Again, this commenter said our media is a major concern due to the obvious bias. They are, but just don't forget the clip that I started with and the person that I was showing because he will give you all the bias you could ever imagine. Matter of fact, here's a little bit more.
For one happy kumbaya. Because when I think of Joe Biden, I think of unity itself, unity embodied. A man who just wants to bring the country together, restore what's been broken. And so this is what Biden ran with. That this was a unity speech
He didn't, but he called them. I forget what he said in the beginning. I'm going to go back. I'm going to find it. It was actually pretty interesting from a media bias.
In focus. Last night, Emperor Palpatine or Joe Biden, take your pick.
That is an example of media bias. And what I would say to anybody who still relies on the media to be anything other than a business, please know that there are media on both sides that do the exact same thing. So when you speak to the media, I don't know why they always sort of abdicate it to the left, and they forget that there are outlets on the right who are more than willing to go as far as the left could ever dream to make sure people start with an impression or start with a message that aligns with what they think and the audience that they would like to grow. So it is always interesting. But there was that qualifier. You saw the qualifier. Joe Biden said it didn't apply to everybody, but it was divisive for the people it did actually apply to. There's certainly no question about that. But I was also talking the irony that we see in that. Here's a good one. The pictures from it was an ominous look. I don't know if that if that is the optics he was looking for, But boy, did it play into the right's hands pretty good. It was an ominous picture. The background obviously didn't look exactly like that when you were watching, but from that perspective, boy, that was a pretty good view. Now, Ted Cruz, certainly someone who doesn't mind trying to be polarizing, said tonight, Joe Biden vilified millions of Americans in a divisive and angry speech that was detached from the reality of his political failures. Well, he wasn't talking about his political failures. He was talking about people he believed were a problem. So I would imagine that those two would be detached. Don't get me wrong. He isn't actually interested in restoring the soul of the nation. He's only interested in pitting his fellow Americans against one another. Ted Cruz, I don't know if you could stand on that high ground. I'm not arguing what you believe, and I'm not arguing against the fact that he wasn't trying to restore the soul of the nation. He was trying to target a group and isolate them and say they weren't the soul of the nation and that they are a threat. I believe almost every time you tweet or talk, you do the same. Marco Rubio, angry man smears half of the people of this country. He is supposed to lead and promise to unite us. Now, that's the difference between why I used to think Marco Rubio would be a moderate voice and somebody that I could get behind, and Ted Cruz, who I obviously can't. I could understand Ted Cruz if he'd answer questions more directly. I could understand Ted Cruz if I felt like he was being more honest and sincere. I'm not arguing his policy. I'm not arguing his political perspective because we all have a right to it and ours are different. I'm more of a centrist and he certainly is clearly not. But even this, Marco Rubio tried to moderate it a little bit, called him an angry man. If you're a MAGA fan, yeah, he's angry at you. I don't know that he's angry at everyone. I think he was pretty specific in his divisive speech. But I agree. He's supposed to lead, and he promised to unite, and he didn't do it. You can see the difference in moderating views. Two U.S. senators with different perspective, different words, and the ability to resonate to different people. But we go back to the irony of I don't imagine Ted Cruz had much to say when Donald Trump retweeted this one with the man tweeting or saying, in the tweet, in the video, white power. Thank you to the great people of the villages. The radical left do-nothing Democrats will fall in the fall. Corrupt Joe is shot. See you soon. In this, they were chanting white power. The president, the sitting president of the United States, retweeted that. Where was the angst from the right for that? And I'll be honest, I'm expecting to see from the left right now people who should be trying to moderate what Joe Biden said. We are a divided states of America. These are the reasons why. Our leadership is taking us in opposite directions, and they're proud of it. They're not concerned about it. They're not worried about it. They're proud of it. It's what they do. They have absolutely no problem continuing to do it. But I wonder where the same people were when this was being said. Of course, we know there's certainly more. Donald Trump was not a uniting man. I remember this. Trump shares video of supporters saying the only good Democrat is a dead Democrat. I think that rises to the level of Joe Biden's MAGA divisive speech. So for the people who support Trump, supported the white power tweet, not the tweet itself, but the man who tweeted it, supported the only good Democrat is a dead Democrat, which was also retweeted by Trump. I don't know how you stand on high ground talking about division. If you don't make the transition and start leading yourself, I don't know how you get here. I don't know how this is your calling card. If you didn't say anything when the only good Democrat is a dead Democrat was posted. I don't know how you stand with this. And if this is who Joe Biden was talking about, do you actually have an opinion about this part? I won't say MAGA. I can't tell you this man's affiliation. I can just tell you he's got a Camp Auschwitz shirt on. I can just see what you see. Trump and Pence with the swastika. And again, people are free to believe what they want. I'm not suggesting that that man or the person holding that flag is supposed to feel different, has to feel different. They are free to feel any way they want. It's only when they cross the line of imposing that on other people and their right to liberty and the pursuit of happiness and justice does it become an issue. yes, it is hateful. I can't imagine a Jew in America who would look at that shirt and think it was a effective way of communicating anything. But again, that man has the right to do and say whatever he wants. But Joe Biden thinks he was targeting that man, that group. That's who he thinks he was targeting, and their actions on January 6th are what he considers to be a threat to America. The candidates that are running now who believe the election was a lie, the candidates that are running for Secretary of State and want to be in position to physically make changes or secure outcomes that man may want. I say may, I don't know him. I can't speak for him. Again, he's free to think what he wants. I'm not trying to change what he thinks. I'm not trying to tell you that this show, in order to be a supporter or listener, you need to do this. All I really want you to do is subscribe, like the Facebook page, follow us on Twitter. I'm not trying to change your view. I'm trying to have thoughtful, respectful conversations. You can change it on your own based on hearing your fellow Americans who are just trying to go through life like you are. That's up to you. That's completely up to you. But again, when you see the swastika and Trump flags, when you see a guy with the band and the MAGA hat, I think those are the people Joe Biden was talking about. And it was divisive, and those people weren't likely to ever unify with Joe Biden anyway. But if you're going to lead us to a place of unity, a positive place with solutions, a moderate voice to get us there. Politically, he probably did what he needed to do. But the politics of America aren't good. We're not better off as a result of the way we're all looking at American politics. We're just not. We're not. This one I saw on Facebook. I edited it for content. Republicans, F Joe Biden. Biden, F you too. Republicans, what? I can't believe he's doing that. I can't believe he's saying it. There is a lot of irony in what we've been seeing. There's a ton of irony in what we've been seeing. Again, Biden's speech was ironic and divisive, but there's a ton of irony in the response to it. Another one, Twitter. People who support Biden after these comments, keep up the good work. It's a MAGA headstone, 2015 to 2020. That's where we are, America. That's what we see happening. That's what we look like today. You don't have to wonder why there is hate, why there is violence. You don't have to wonder why we're not getting better. That's it. Biden's divisive speech, the irony of the people who don't mind when their party gives that same speech and they do it tenfold. That's why we are where we are. It's the basis of our nation today. But then, of course, there's more. As you look at the divide and you see Joe Biden on the attack, Trump couldn't pass up an opportunity to be heard, to be the center of attention with these remarks.
In front of the justice's home and the homes of others. Even while January 6th defendants are having their lives totally destroyed and being treated worse than terrorists and murderers, despite most being charged with parading through the Capitol. Most people should not be treated the way they're being treated. And if I become president someday, if I decide to do it, I will be looking at them very, very seriously for pardons. Very, very seriously. They've been treated.
Well, that feeds right into the hand. That feeds right into the minds of the people who think democracy is a threat. If you can attack our Capitol on the day that the electoral votes were being certified, if you expected the vice president that day to take in a fake slate of electors, if you were literally trying to change the transition of power for the first time in the 150 years since the Civil War, there are going to be people who think you are a threat to democracy. If you're not respecting the 60 courts that say the basis of the lie aren't true, if you're not listening to the Republican secretaries of state who said in many states it was a fair and safe election, and when I said many states, many of them saying one of the safest in history, then you maybe not a direct threat as if you're trying to attack it yourself, but you have a lot of supporters who were. Those are the people I believe Joe Biden was trying to target in a speech about unity, which again makes the speech incredibly divisive. From a political standpoint, he's going to win points for doing it. There are Americans who don't understand the big lie. They don't understand how a president who is supposed to uphold the Constitution is ignoring the results of our courts. We don't understand a man who can't simply concede. There's a lot of things that people don't understand. I threw myself in there in the not conceding part. I don't understand how 2 years later you actually just recently called for a new election to be reinstated as president. I don't understand a lot of these things, but pardons for people who were criminally trespassing, people who literally assaulted police officers, from the same group of people who scream Blue Lives Matter the loudest, we now are looking for pardons. From a divisive standpoint, Joe Biden's speech was divisive, pardoning people on January 6th as if something they did was right and lawful. After you talk about BLM protesters and the rioters and looters, who I have a problem with as well, but now you're talking about pardoning people? The Biden-Trump divide is America. That's who we are right now. It's the reason I hold out hope for a party like the Forward Party. Not left, not right, but forward. The idea that we're looking out for Americans, not parties, Americans, that has such great appeal to me. It really does. Because the polarization of these two men, where could we possibly end up other than both fighting to get all or nothing? And that's hoping they get nothing, because either's version of all would likely be a problem. I don't know what Joe Biden wants all MAGA supporters to do. I don't know that they think he's offering them anything better. And from a leadership perspective, if he really wanted to get their support, I think he would need to. Trump, I don't know how you are still fighting losing by that many votes. I don't know how you'd be afraid of mail-in ballots. I think the risk of voter fraud is far less than isolating and eliminating voters. I'd rather there be a little more fraud if we got a lot more Americans voting. Not that I want more fraud, but I could tolerate a little bit more if the end result was millions and millions more Americans actually voting, because we made it easier for them to do it, not harder. I don't even know what the leader looks like that actually wants to unify people. I don't know how within this two-party system we could even get that. I know we can get independents to vote, but again, as we talk about a third party and hoping that there is policy discussions with independents, policy discussions with people on the left and the right willing to moderate, I don't care what it takes, but there has to be something in the middle of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And if there's not, we're just going to get more of this forever. I think Donald Trump is a unique person. I think he's got some unique characteristics, and most of them, again, if I had to put through the litmus test of my children, they don't add up enough for me to support a man like that. And I have always said there has to be a Republican who can carry out some of the beliefs and policies that he wants, but actually just be a good person while you do it. Do you have to have your integrity be knocked as frequently as Trump's can be in order to get things done? Is the perception of power and literally ignoring all wrong worth the outcome of the pure polarization? No different than having a polite version of Joe Biden all of a sudden turn divisive and think that America's actually going to be better off. We're not going to be. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out. It'll be interesting to see if Donald Trump runs. But what is ironic is the number of people complaining about Biden's speech who never said a word when it came out of someone they supported. Likewise, the number of people on the left who were quiet after having screamed for years about how divisive Trump was. I wish people would just be honest. I wish they would share the truth, not their truth. I wish people would moderate. I wish people wanted for more. I wish people wanted for better. I can't say that they do, but I can say that the Divided States of America show will continue to bring up these divisive issues and look for that middle ground where the mainstream Americans who don't live and die on politics, where they have to be, where they don't get to play the sides at work or the sides at schools or the two sides against each other with their children. We actually have to come up with real solutions to solve the day-to-day issues. The approach of these two men on Friday didn't do anything for us. They just tried to embolden each side. I don't know, maybe Joe Biden thinks he needs to give the perception of power and go on the attack thinking, hey, it worked for Trump. Well, Joe Biden needs to remember Donald Trump lost. Donald Trump, in saying that he would very, very seriously consider pardons for the January 6th defendants and that they were treated very unfairly, I think he's prioritizing support for him over American values and even the security of our capital. and whether or not that is how we resist things we don't like. Sad commentary. It's why I didn't do it on Friday. I couldn't get myself to do it. I couldn't get myself to do it. Is it a Monday thing? Yeah, because that's the America we live in. What are you going to do about it? What role are you going to play in this discussion? We talk about the media bias. How much of that bias are you going to accept? Do you even bother looking for the truth, or do you just look to be validated in your own beliefs? How many of you don't care what the truth is? You just want what you want, and you want your right to be right. If that's where you stand, you are contributing to the divide. And I don't know how you can complain so much when the other side just speaks louder, because you're speaking the same thing. You're complicit in the same behavior. If all you care about is being right and don't care about how wrong it is to paint that picture. I keep saying it. Be better, America. Be better Americans. The world doesn't run on our politicians. If we actually stood for issues that matter, if we actually look for consensus, we could decide the fate of America and wouldn't sit back and wait for our politicians to do what they do and wait for the media to report it the way they report it. Take a stand, and I don't mean riot. Speak up. Use your voice. Don't just wait for elections. Pick the issues that are most important to you and make clear what we, the people, and the consensus of Americans would like to see happen. I know we'd all like to see some moderation. And for those of you that would like less moderation, you're going to fail. You are absolutely going to fail. If nothing else, history has taught you, although it goes too slow, unfairness, bigotry, racism, sexism, they're all going to continue to go down because more Americans recognize wrong is wrong and political power doesn't make something right. Don't forget it. Keep tuning in. Watch replays. This is the Divided States of America show. We're here weekdays at noon, 3 p.m. Eastern time. I invite you to share it with friends, like our page, comment, subscribe, follow on Twitter. We do have a plan in the days and weeks to come to expand this show beyond friends and family and make it clear to Americans that the divide isn't something we cherish. It's not something we want to benefit from. It's something we want to eliminate. I appreciate you tuning in. I'm your host, Marlon Gardenera. I'll be back tomorrow with more of the divisive issues that divide our great nation. We'll talk to you then. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching the Divided States of America show. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing. Share this video with your family and friends.